Good morning, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Education USA Western Hemisphere LLM webinar series. Thank you for being here representing so many different countries. I'm Gladys Burnett. I'm the Education USA advisor based out of Panama. And we welcome all the different representatives that are here from different US schools. They will have the opportunity to speak to you for 40 to 45 minutes. And then we'll have a 5 to 10 minutes a Q&A session. And then the most exciting part, you will have the opportunity to talk to them in separate private Zoom rooms. So be attentive to the different links in the chat and enjoy the session today. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Carmen Perez. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar about the differences between a JD and an LL.M degree and the practical work experience that you can secure during the LL.M program. My name is Carmen Perez Yorca, and I am Assistant Dean for International Graduate Programs at the University of Miami School of Law. I will be the first speaker today, but I am accompanied by wonderful colleagues from a number of law schools who will also be presenting. I would like to thank Education USA for putting this event together, and thank you also to all the students who are participating and to those who will be looking at the recording. I look forward to chatting with all of you later in my Zoom room. So I'm going to be speaking about the JD degree, the Juris Doctor. I will start with an overview of the timeline for JD and the steps that a student has to follow in order to practice law in the US. Of course, the JD is not the only degree or the only pathway to practice, and my colleagues will be sharing information on the LL.M degree as well. It might be that the LL.M is of most interest to many of you, but it is important to first understand what a JD is before we go on and share information about the LL.M. So I'll start by saying that the JD is a graduate degree. What this means is that in order to get a JD degree, a student first needs to complete an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree, which here in the United States typically takes 4 years. So that undergraduate degree can be in any area of specialization. It doesn't have to be related to law. Once that undergraduate degree is completed, a student can then apply to law school, and we'll see how you do that, and get the Juris Doctor degree, which takes 3 years. Now, if an international student has completed an undergraduate degree in their home country, they can also the JD. If, in addition, that undergraduate degree is also a law degree, the student may be able to get advanced standing credits and graduate with a JD in as little as 2 years. But please, and this is very important, note that not all schools give advanced standing credits to foreign trained students. So please ask the admissions representatives of the schools that you're interested in applying to. So after completion of the JD, so we're now saying we have 4 years of undergraduate degree plus 3 years of JD, then a student can sit for the bar exam in the state in which they want to practice. And after passing the bar and complying with any other admission requirements, which may include other exams, such as a professional responsibility exams or other admissions requirements, they will then be able to practice law in the state in which they are admitted. So now let's look at a little bit more detail at how the JD is structured. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is the purpose of a JD? The main purpose of a JD is to practice law in the US. You may also use it to teach law in the US. And its structure, as I said, it's a 3-year degree, 3 years in residence. Some schools do offer an online JD. The first year, the students take all of the required courses. These are all the foundational law courses. They typically include contracts and torts and property, civil procedure, sometimes constitutional law, criminal procedure, legal communication. So all of the required courses are taken on the first year. And the next 2 years, when students are called 2Ls and 3Ls, they take electives. And electives may include some graduation requirements. They may include some writing requirements. They may include some skills requirements. They may include something like professional responsibility. But in general, students are free to design their own course of study. Now, the JD will qualify graduates to sit for the bar exam in any state in the US. This is a very important difference with an LL.M. If you have a JD, you can sit for the bar in any state in the US. There are 203 law schools in the US that are approved by the ABA, by the American Bar Association, and they pretty much all have the same entry requirements. These are the elements of the application. Of course, as I explained earlier, when I was talking about the timeline, you do need to have an undergraduate degree before you can apply to the JD. You do also have to sit for the LSAT, the Law School Admission Test. And if you're not a native English speaker, and if you didn't go to school in an English-speaking country, you will also have to take the TOEFL, which is an English proficiency exam. The TOEFL is the most commonly accepted English proficiency exam, but some schools do accept other exams as well, such as the IELTS. So you might also want to ask the admissions representatives which English proficiency exams they accept. You will also need your transcripts from your home school. You will need a resume or your curriculum vitae, a statement of purpose, and letters of recommendation. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the cost. And the cost of a JD, depending on the school, might generally be between $120,000 and $180,000 for the 3 years. Scholarships are available, and this is very important. And if there's a message that I want to leave you with before I pass the virtual mic over to the next speaker, is do ask the different schools about their scholarship opportunities. We do like to help international students with, partial or sometimes full tuition scholarships when we can. So please stop by all of our Zoom rooms and ask us about it. This concludes my presentation, and I will now pass the virtual mic over to the next speaker, which is Clemence. Clemence, thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm Clemence Kuchera. I'm the Assistant Dean for the Graduate Online and International Programs at McGeorge School of Law. So I'm going to talk about the LL.M program. I'm not going to talk about the timeline because my colleague Olivera Jovanovic will talk about the timeline. So what is a Master's of Law or an LL.M? I think many of you have done some research and are already quite familiar, but there's two things that I wanted to share with you. First, nearly all of ABA Law School, American Bar Association accredited law school, offer an LL.M program. So you're going to have a lot of choices and a lot of research to do. So do take your time. LL.M programs are not just for international students. They are also for JD graduates. Not all law schools, though, offer LL.M programs offered to both JD and international students. I mean, like American and international students, but you may want to look into that if this is something that matters to you. So I put it like a few bullet points about why pursuing an LL.M degree. And I think as I'm thinking about it, what I wanted for you to think about is, should you do more an LL.M degree or a JD degree? Both, it's going to be an investment of money, but of your time. Both are going to have slightly different outcomes. So you do want to think about that. An LL.M degree is a great degree to have to gain expertise in a particular area of law. It's a great degree if you want to practice and improve your legal English skills. It gives you access to a bar exam. But depending on your career goal, like a JD degree, frankly, may make the most sense. So you do want to think about that. And again, depending on your career goals, like some LL.M programs are going to be better than others. So that's a second set of item that I wanted to discuss with you today is, in my view, when I counsel prospective students, I always ask them, what are your career goals? I think it's crucial for you to really spend quite some time thinking about it. Speaking with alumni of LL.M programs, speaking with attorneys that work in a field where you're hoping to work. This is going to certainly help you determine the location of where you want to study, if you're going to have to look about scholarship opportunities. Just again to mention what my colleague just previously talked about, like nearly all of the law schools do offer scholarship for to international students. You also will want to take into consideration whether practical experience is important or not. Is it something that for you matters? You also will want to look at the application requirements, and I'll spend a minute talking about that, because the application requirements, although there is a commonality amongst all of us as to what we request, the standards may be different. There's also the timeline that my colleague will mention that you definitely want to take into consideration. I am myself an LLM graduate. I did an LLM program, so for me and my career goals, it make a good sense. But I encourage you for you to take a minute just to think about the JD degree and don't automatically dismiss it. So yeah, perfect. So now I just want to end my presentation just talking about the application requirements. Unlike the JD program, you do not need to take the LSAT exam, nor do you have to take any standardized test in order to gain entrance to an LLM program. Most law schools, I'm going to say, if not all, do require you to have a prior law degree. There may be some exception if you are studying in a country where political science and law are offered at the same institution and are taught by the same faculty. But so you would want to connect directly with the different schools. Obviously, transcripts are, we're going to ask you for a copy of your transcripts. Some schools do accept copies for the admission phase of the process, and then if you're admitted, they will require for the original. So again, check on that. Proof of English proficiency. My colleague already mentioned what is it? A resume, a statement of purpose, letters of recommendation. And you need to note that some school will require an interview. Do not be afraid of that. This is a great opportunity for us to ask questions about you, but also for you to ask us questions. This is a great opportunity for you to connect with us and to evaluate the programs that we offer, and if you think that would also make a good fit for you. Ultimately, we all want a win-win, right, relationship where you're going to be successful at our program, and we're gonna, and you're going to flourish as an LM. So if we don't think you're a good fit, don't get despaired. There are plenty of opportunities for you to study in the US. So I'm going to turn this over now to my colleague who's going to talk to you about timeline.
Thank you so much, Clemence. My name is Olivera Jovanovic. I'm the director of the LLM and master's programs at the University of San Francisco School of Law. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the timeline for an LLM program and what factors might influence your individual timeline. So first, I will start with just a general overview of the timeline. You may be at some point in the first box, completing your law degree in your country of origin where you're currently studying. The duration of that degree depends on the country. So typically that will be about 4 to 5 years. From that point, if you decide to go immediately into an LLM program, most programs are for 1 academic year, 2 semesters. There are some maybe variations depending on the number of units you study and things like that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Finally, you have the opportunity post-LLM via either OPT or some other mechanism, which my colleagues will talk about, to stay in the US for up to 1 year. Maybe you're going to stay just for a bar exam. There are a variety of factors that we'll talk about in just a moment. But the general trajectory from first your studies in your home country that prepare you to your post-LLM degree could be as much as 6 or 7 years. And there are probably even additional factors, like I said, for an individual that might change that. So if we could go on to the next slide. What I want to talk about is what factors might influence your individual timeline. And the reason I say this is because I want to echo what some of my colleagues have said, and Clemence said it very well. This is a very personal decision for you. You need to do a lot of research to determine which program is a good fit for you and your professional goals. And likewise, we want to find students that are good fits for our programs. There's a variety of opportunities available to you, and you should invest some time in planning, which brings me to my first bullet point, preparing your application materials. Within that timeline, that you are finishing your law studies in your home country and starting an LLM, you should really think about how long you want, how much time you need to prepare your application materials. Applications generally open about a year ahead of time, although each school will vary slightly. So do think about when you can first start accessing the application for a school that you're interested in, getting your letters of recommendation, preparing your personal statement, and any sort of other entry requirements. Those should all factor into your timeline. You may be able to complete that while you're finishing your degree in law in your home country. You may need some time afterward, and that could impact when you're able to begin your LLM. The other thing to consider, and I've put the link there, is when you're eligible for an LLM. So lsac.org has information on LLM eligibility, and that is what is the completion, the first degree in law, what are the requirements in order to apply for an LLM program. And it's broken down by country. I recommend that be the first place that you begin, and then you also reach out to specific schools to see what it is they require. As my colleague said, if you study a political science and law degree, that might not be an exception for you. Some of our schools also have masters in law programs for those who don't have a first degree in law. So there are a variety of options. The third thing I want to talk about is when you will begin the program. Most schools will, all schools will have a fall intake, and some schools will have a spring intake. So depending on when you finish your degree, when your degree is conferred, when you get your application, when are you looking to start the LLM program? Some schools offer pre-LLM programs, or if you're going to decide to do an English language course ahead of time, all of those things should be factored into your timeline. Finally, the course offerings and units completed. Some of my students think about a spring timeline, a spring intake, but there are certain classes at the law school that they would want to take that are offered in the fall or build upon something already offered in the fall. So it may make sense if you're looking for a specific specialty to think about when the courses are offered within that LLM program. So it's a lot to consider. I think the important thing that you can do that will be most beneficial is after you've set up your goals, think about reaching out to the schools and finding out where the schools you're interested in fall in on each of these topics. And then you'll be able to get a sense of what the right time is for you. I have one more slide. If you would so graciously move over to the next slide. Thank you. All right, timeline for post-LLM opportunities. I'm not going to spend too much time here because my colleagues will talk about work experience via OPT, but the general idea here is if you would like to get additional experience after the LLM, that is certainly something you need to factor in, not only time-wise, but financially as well too. And that is where I'll be the third professional to echo this. Please do reach out to the schools. You can join us in our Zoom rooms, you can make appointments, you can email us and find out about scholarship opportunities. We all offer something, and that's going to be influential on your decision as far as timeline, because if you have scholarship, maybe you can afford to stay longer, or you can afford to sit for the bar exam and take that time. So my final little note is please plan on applying early. Both the bar exam and OPT have very early deadlines, but do not worry. When you enter into your LLM program, you will have wonderful professionals like us that are familiar with those timelines that will be able to guide you and remind you about when to apply and how to start applying for those things. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jennifer from Duke.
Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us, students. We know that you're all interested in both gaining skills and experiencing US legal practice if you're going to invest in coming to the US for an LLM program. So my colleagues have asked me to talk about a very efficient way to do both, which is to take courses that are going to teach you skills while you get credit for your LLM degree. If I can move to the next slide. One, you've heard over and over again, contact us. I would also advise you to look at our websites. We have a great number of student testimonials collected on ours, where you're going to hear from the students themselves what their experience is like. I'll caution you, though, to always ask the professionals the true questions. Don't rely on crowdsourcing information, asking people randomly that you don't know. We're the professionals, and we're going to be happy to answer your questions. So next slide. So one of the unusual and fantastic things about U.S. legal education is that it is very interactive. From that, every single course is going to enhance your skills. You are not going to sit passively in class. You will be expected to have read carefully assignments in advance, and you will be questioned about them, and you will hear a dialogue. So your skill of listening to other people speak will be one skill that is enhanced in every class you're in. And at Duke, you will be in classes with the JD students, some of the smartest law students around. They're a little intimidating at first. They're holding their hand up, they're engaged, but you too can be like that. And once you exercise that, you will become a more confident speaker and be better able at presenting your and defending your positions. So if you come to a US law school, I urge you to be prepared with English and to be brave to participate in this back and forth. But there are also courses that specifically teach skills. So I've listed just a few examples on this slide. Legal research and writing. LL.M programs should have a very good course on how to write like an American lawyer. That's very important. Negotiation is a very popular course that many schools offer. Today, the general counsel of a major European corporation was speaking to our students and saying, you know, I took negotiation back in 1996 and I use it every day. Contract drafting is another example. There will also be sometimes short courses taught by practicing lawyers. We have one at Duke, a group of these courses called Winter Session, where lawyers are talking about how to take a deposition, how to advocate in a human rights case, any variety of things. And these are all ways of learning how to be lawyers in courses that are giving you credit. Next slide, please. You may also learn by representing real clients. Many law schools have what we call clinics. These operate with a faculty member as a supervisor. It's very small enrollment, usually 10 to 15 students maximum in each of our 11 clinics at Duke. And you would be representing people who cannot afford legal representation from lawyers. And you would be doing all the work that is expected of a lawyer, but closely supervised by the faculty member. And these are excellent ways to learn about American culture, to do good. I mean, lawyers are held to professional responsibility and are supposed to be helping the public, and to practice these skills of, say, incorporating a startup or representing a child who has been held back in school for bad reasons, or helping someone who's terminally ill draft a will. These are wonderful experiences to get credit. You may also use those experiences to satisfy the New York bar's pro bono requirement. The New York bar is one of the states that many LLMs take the exam of, and it requires, before you're admitted, that you show you've done public interest work. Next slide. So another example of learning by doing and experiencing with real practice is what at Duke we call an externship course, because we put you externally outside of the law school into a law office setting, either a company, a nonprofit, or NGO, or a court. And there you would be spending a day a week with the lawyer in that office, helping, watching, learning what it is to practice law in that setting. You would also be meeting once a week with our externship professor, talking about what is professionalism, what happened this week, what better communication style could you use, what ethical questions arose. And then this is also, here I've put some examples because you must also take a course related to the law placement that you're going to. So if you look at this Precision Hawk here, that's a drone startup company in an area where we are, which has many startups. And you have to take artificial intelligence and the law as a regular course. You get the externship. You spend a day a week with the general counsel of this drone company, and then you also meet with the externship professor. So these are just some examples here, but law schools have many of these opportunities to get credit for actually being in a law firm setting. So that is very quick in a nutshell, a number of ways that you can learn and get into the legal practice in the United States and get credit toward your LLM degree. Next, Jessica, who is operating the slides.
And I managed to operate slides and unmute myself, so it's a minor victory. So hello, everybody. To echo what my colleagues have said, we're so glad that you're joining us today, whether you're here live or whether you watch this recording in the future. We appreciate your attention. I am the Director of International and Graduate Programs at Stetson University College of Law in Florida, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about non-credit bearing opportunities. So Dean Marr spoke about ways you can earn credit and practical experience, and I'm going to talk to you about ways you can get some practical experience outside of a credit earning environment. So why would you do this? Why would you work in a way that you're not earning credit? So for a couple of reasons, this might be an option that you want to consider. One is that at some schools, tuition is based on the credit hours you're taking. And in all schools, the number of credit hours you can take each semester is capped. There's a limit to how many courses you can take in a semester. So it's an amazing opportunity to take courses for credit that give you this experience, but you may find that you don't have room in your schedule to do that, or you don't want to have to give up a substantive course in order to do one of these more experiential type courses. So you may want to think about doing something outside of the academic credit system. And also you may have more flexibility in the options that are outside of course credits, because there may not be co-requisites or prerequisites or things like that that would go along with those courses. So what are examples of this kind of work? So one great example is research assistant positions. First, when you are in the United States on a student visa, as I expect many of you would be coming to do an LLM, you're only allowed to work on campus, basically. There may be some limited exceptions, but if you're looking for a paid opportunity to work, you may be limited to on-campus opportunities. So you could become a research assistant for a faculty member. And what research assistants basically do is they work with faculty members with upcoming scholarship, publications, things that they are working on in their area of scholarly interest. You might be able to help teach courses. That is not as common. Law generally doesn't have a TA type position, as do other graduate programs in the United States, but that's not always true. And sometimes those opportunities do exist. As I said, you can work with the faculties. If you want to do that, what I would recommend is that you research various faculty members at the school you plan to attend and find somebody who is working on a field that you would like to be more involved in, either because you have some work experience in the field and you think you could be helpful, or it's a new area of practice for you, but you really want to learn more about it. By doing that and by doing excellent work with those faculty members, you may find that they are willing to be references for you in the future, or they may be willing to connect you with other people that they know who are also working in or interested in that field. And those can be fantastic professional networks for you to start to cultivate while you're a student. You might also look at extracurricular activities. These could include moot courts or journals or student organizations. And student organizations at law schools can really be quite diverse in terms of their focus. So some will focus on an area of interest. For example, you might find a group of students in a bankruptcy law group where students are all coming together because they're interested in bankruptcy law. Or you might find an affinity group. So affinity groups would be groups that generally are based on some sort of characteristic of the student. So many law schools have a Hispanic and Latino student group association, or there's a Black law students association, or a women's law student association. There's also groups affiliated with different religious denominations. So you might find a group of students that share some similar characteristics with you, and you'll wish to join those student groups. Or you can find shared interests. I remember when I was a student, there was a very active softball student group, and students would get together and play sports as a way to relax when they weren't studying. You can join more than one student organization. So really look at the variety of student organizations, because I think that as important as the learning is that happens inside of the classroom at law school, it's equally important the learning that happens outside of the classroom. There, you're going to hone your leadership skills. You're going to learn how to interact with students that may have different cultural backgrounds than your own. And you're going to start to form some really important lifelong bonds with people that will become part of your professional network and will remain that way for years. So I know I graduated from law school almost 20 years ago. I'm still in touch with many of my classmates, and they are some of my closest friends. And that's something really valuable that happens in these types of opportunities at law schools. So again, great way for you to meet and get to know other law students. You'll polish your legal skills or learn about a new practice area. It's a way to demonstrate an area in an area. If you don't have a particular practice area on your resume, in that you don't have work experience in that area, by joining a student group that's related to that area, you are making a demonstration to future employers that you're really committed to that type of law or that type of practice. And it's a way to show them that. And again, you can demonstrate your leadership skills. All of these things are really valuable. And frankly, they're a lot of fun when you're a law student. You might also choose to do some pro bono volunteer work. So this is another wonderful way to volunteer your time and network and meet other lawyers, not just law students, but also practicing attorneys in the area, either geographically that you're located in, or in an area of law that you're very focused in. You'll be able to polish your legal skills and your knowledge and also explore new practice areas. You might find out that there's an area you'd never thought about before, but after volunteering in that area, you learn that it's really quite fascinating. It's something you do want to spend more time on and focus on. Again, if you're interested in pivoting your career to a new area that you don't have experience in prior, this allows you to demonstrate that interest. It lets you feel good about what you're doing, frankly. It lets you demonstrate that you're willing and interested in giving back to the community that you are now a part of as a legal scholar and as a LLM student in the United States. And if none of those things persuade you, a nice reminder that the New York Board of Law Examiners, because we know that statistically, LLM students more of them take the New York bar than all of the other jurisdictions combined. And the New York bar requires that LLM students complete 50 hours of pro bono work in order to be sworn in. So that's another good reason to do pro bono work. And on top of the New York Board of Law Examiner requirements, some law schools will also require you to complete pro bono service as a graduation requirement of their program. So these are all great reasons to look at this as another way to gain experience during your LLM year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Insa to discuss her topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you everybody for attending the session. This is the last section that we are offering you, and I'm talking about opportunities after graduation. You heard the acronym OPT. I'll explain what that is and talk a little bit about job search. So Jessica, next slide. Thank you. So the OPT, optional practical training, as you know, you will come most likely on an F1 visa. That's something that you will obtain through the international office of the law school where you have been admitted. It allows you to stay in the country until you have completed the graduation requirements. And of course, there are a couple more caveats and regulations and things to consider, but that's the idea. After that, if you want to stay in the country, you can do that with the optional practical training, which is an extension of your F1 visa, basically a benefit that you obtain with the study visa. It gives you employment authorization for up to 12 months after graduation. So there are some requirements to consider, and this is a little bit technical, but it's important to know to plan ahead. You must find a job in the field of study, which would be law for you, and that is pretty broadly defined. You can even work in the law school library if you don't find a job in a law firm or for a public interest institution or for in-house attorney. It doesn't have to be a law firm. You may work part-time 20 hours or less, or full-time, and it can be paid or unpaid. So the OPT is basically another visa for you that allows you to work outside of the law school. There are some considerations to be made when you apply for the OPT, and again, you will get all the details and the forms to complete from the international office of the law school that you are going to attend. You can apply up to 90 days before you graduate and no longer than 60 days after your graduation. That is the so-called grace period. If you decide after you graduate to take the bar exam immediately in the United States, then you can use the grace period. You do not need to apply for OPT. If you don't pass, then that's a different matter, because then you have to leave the country. But that's the time frame. And for the application itself, when you file, you do not have to have a job offer yet. That can come later. But that's something that you need to keep in mind, that you do need the job offer to actually maintain the status. Next slide, please. So after you applied for the OPT and after it has been granted, you must be employed within 90 days of the start date. And that kind of puts you in a bind because the processing times have slowed down. I don't actually know how long it takes these days to get the OPT, but that's something that you need to consider, because while you're waiting, you cannot work in the United States. So you can also change jobs during the period of the OPT, but you cannot have in total more than 90 days of unemployment during this period. You can also have 2 jobs, but you always need to have some form of employment during this time, which is the idea of getting this visa. And one of my colleagues mentioned already that during the first year at law school, on your F1 visa, you are not allowed to work outside of the campus. So all you can do is work on campus, and that's sometimes very difficult to get a position there, because obviously it's a competitive environment. But if you study for longer than 2 semesters, then you could be eligible for CPT, which stands for Curricular Practical Training, which is kind of the OPT while you study. It's granted for each semester that you study, and it is tied to one of the classes that you're enrolled in, or if it's an integral part of the program. So if your program is set up to include a mandatory skills or externship or practical experience outside of the law school, then you would be eligible for CPT. You still must be enrolled in the degree. You cannot have graduated, but that's the only way to get permission to work outside of the law school while you study. And obviously you need to be enrolled, as I just mentioned, and you can work no more than 20 hours per week during the semester. And that brings me to the topic of job search, which is perhaps much more complicated than you are familiar with in your country. It takes a lot of time, and it's a science in and of itself. So from reviewing all the resumes for the applications, and from my own background, I know that the US US lawyers have a specific setup for their resumes. So you need to Americanize your resume. The reason is that employers obviously get hundreds of resumes they look at. And if they have to think and understand which way you laid out your resume, that's already way too much time for them to work with. So usually they take 2 seconds and then put it aside into the yes pile or the no pile. So you want to have the same format. for your resume. You probably don't have to do that when you apply because we are used to all the different formats, but when you apply for a job, that's a different matter. So all law schools have a career services office, and these employees do nothing but help the students find jobs or prepare them for the job search, because there are various strategies that you can employ to make the best out of it and to market yourself, basically. So one is the resume, the other one is the cover letter. So every resume is accompanied by a cover letter where you sort of like the personal statement in your application, go beyond the sheer data of your resume and explain why you would be a good fit for this job or for this employer. So that's it's like a little writing class in and of itself. So that's what you will do with the people in the career services as well. And then there are job search strategies. Many law schools have job postings. They work with their alumni to try to get them to hire the graduates from their law school. A big part of job search is networking, which may sound scary to some people, but if you really think about it, you have that skill already. You ask around your friends and family and neighbors and anyone you know to find out what the employment field entails, whether they know anyone who may be hiring, and so on and so on. And that's what you will do too in the United States when you're looking for a job. You start with one person who may not have a job, but that person says, well, why don't you talk to that person? So that's how it snowballs into your network. In terms of interviews, there are also many skills that you can learn and pick up. I've interviewed quite a number of applicants for jobs, and I'm always amazed at how skilled these applicants were in representing themselves. So some schools offer mock interviews where you are being recorded during a mock interview, and then the career services counselor will review that interview with you, which is a little embarrassing, but it's really helpful. Job postings, alumni networks, many offices hold recruiting fairs and also workshops. So I would encourage you to attend those workshops if you're looking for a position in the United States, because there are lots of skills that you can acquire and pick up on. And that concludes the presentation part. We're moving on now to the Zoom rooms. I would encourage you to make an effort to hop into every law school Zoom room, because this is a great opportunity for you to find out how those law schools work and what's special about each school, and to ask your questions. So don't be shy. All right, thank you very much. Thank you to Gladys and Marina and Education USA. And I conclude with that.
Thank you, Insa. Thank you so much. I'm just going to repeat one question that we received early on about what was advanced standing credit. And Carmen Perez Yorca answered it. She said, advanced standing credits are credits that you get for your previous law studies. And they will reduce the time it takes you to graduate with a JD. And then Jennifer added later, some law schools will allow students to transfer from their LLM program to their JD program, granting advanced standing from those LLM credits. So I think those were very, very useful comments, and thank you for answering them. I don't see any more questions, so let's go ahead. You can see everybody, go ahead and copy and paste the links and copy them somewhere else so that you make sure that when the session ends, you don't lose all the links and you can enjoy a fruitful conversation with all the representatives. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us during this Western Hemisphere session. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Some links are here in the chat.